And a pleasant, warm good morning, Saturday morning to all of you listening or watching on Facebook Live. I'm Dennis Washington with Richard Harp, and we've got our coffee this morning. Happy Saturday morning. Richard, how you
Right.
doing?
Sure. I'm
Man,
doing great. Helping me with the warmth for sure.
yes,
And
yes, it is.
closing up, I've got my slippers on. This is ready to go, man.
We are
Ready to go.
we are fired up this morning. It is for those of you that are not aware of from where we're at this morning in the Birmingham, Alabama area. It is a cold rain. It's been raining and cold now for several hours, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop most of the day today. And for us, that just means a great day to be inside with coffee and in warm slippers and a good day indoors. Unfortunately, a lot of Christmas parades got canceled today because of it, but you and I are here and we're having good and I understand you've got like a birthday party to go to later today, so you're going to have to get out in all this.
It's our boys are just right next to each other, so we're having a little party with them, and they've invited their friend to go play laser tag. So we'll be indoors too.
That perfect. That's perfect. Well, and speaking of indoors and having fun, last night, before we get started with the show, I just want to bring up last night about the pizza was sent we had at the church building last night. Absolutely tremendous. You were unfortunately I couldn't make it back from Atlanta in time last night, but you were there. Tell us about it. What it was like last night.
Well, it was indoors for most people until the doors were opened and people had to line up outside the building, around the building. It was, but it really wasn't that cold last night, and so people didn't have to stay outside too long. But I mean, the amount of people who came, it was precious, and just being able to have this. What we do is we have an in-house Santa Claus, and the way I explained it to people was I said, well, you haven't met our youth minister, but he's very good friends with Santa Claus. And so it was a good little segue, and subtle when the children were around,
Sure.
But being able to, provide something for the community where people can come and, it's wholesome. We provided pizza, and it was about 150 pizzas. We had actually 149 were used, one pizza left at the end of the night.
Wow.
And then the moment I took the picture, other kids came up and devoured it. So it was like, but we were all cleaning up. It was amazing the amount of members that came out that just were able to talk to people in the crowd. And I'll tell you, I was talking the whole night. I think, man, just practice for Sunday. I'm telling you.
Well, yeah. Right, exactly.
Time.
Of course. Yeah, make sure we have plenty of vitamins for you this weekend because we may need it. Absolutely. Yes, yeah, the cough drops too. Absolutely. Man, that is tremendous.
Right.
And for everybody that's watching or listening on Facebook this morning, we thank you if you came out and telling your friends about it. We really appreciate that as well. That just absolutely tremendous.
And what I appreciated from the community was also sharing with us how they came. We had so many who mentioned they saw it on Facebook or they got a flyer from their school. But also I had some who was saying that there were members, like one lady said 3 different members invited me to come. One was at the supermarket and in other places, people that she'd never met before. And because I was like, oh, you have friends in the congregation? She said, well, no, actually, these are just people who I was in conversation with and they just invited me. So it's just encouraging.
Yes.
The other encouragement was while we're sitting there with the pizza and just seeing the youth group handing out these people, bringing the lemonade and helping with the tables. And what was wonderful to me was hearing a lady. She said, now, is that the youth group? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, she said, that's just incredible. I said, I know. I said, they could be anywhere on a Friday night. They could be out, doing their own thing, but they just chose to be here. And she looked at me and she said, and with a smile on their face. And she said, it warmed her heart. And so that was encouraging. And I want our youth group to know that. And just
tremendous.
We could spend the whole time.
We could. It was, but the short story is thank you for everybody that had a part in that and for coming out last night. It was absolutely tremendous. So let's spend a few minutes this morning talking about giving. And for those of you, I'll let you explain why we've kind of been in for the last couple of weeks talking so much about giving, because I believe it has to do with tomorrow being what we call Purpose Sunday at our congregation.
Right. And I mean, I think what we've been talking about this morning is a good segue to discuss this. I mean, people gave so much of their time last night and gave so much of their, of just their heart to be able to speak with everyone. I saw people going around and just greeting every family, and just saying, thank you all for coming and getting in conversations. And that was powerful. So giving is just it comes from the heart as far as everything that we do. But to get us to what we're doing tomorrow is our Purpose Sunday. And this is something that the Deerfoot elders here have decided on, that they allow the flock, our congregation, to set the budget in essence. So tomorrow it's not giving, where people, but the idea is it's a purpose card. You write on the card what you plan to give for the rest of the year. And so based on that, the elders will set the budget. And so that means from that, we're able to do events like we had last night, but also from that, we're able to take on new works and people that come in and are asking for support or things like that from our congregation. We're able to help them because we know what has been purposed. Yeah. And so we're just looking at what does the Bible have to say about giving. And so we've already had 2 lessons on that. And tomorrow will be the final lesson concerning our giving.
And I absolutely love it. And I want to start off this morning because your sermon this past Sunday on this topic specifically talked about the idea of the cart before the horse. And there were several topics and things you brought out in the sermon, but one of them I wanted to play for everybody to kind of refresh our memories on this. You talked about, and the way I summed it up in my notes was blessing others with grace we've received. Let me play this clip and then get your reaction to that.
But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. He's talking about in our path of life, as we walk through life, we are going to be sowing and reaping. And are we to sow to our flesh? If we do, we'll reap corruption. No, we're supposed to sow to the Spirit and reap eternal life. We have to keep this in mind. He's talking about the collection for the saints, the called out ones, those who are holy, who are set apart. He's talking about those who are reaping to their spirit for eternal life. So we love because He first loved us and gave Himself for us. That's why giving is so important to be done even after the Lord's Supper. So we're reminded as to why we are doing this.
So, when I hear that and discussed, it's almost one of those things initially that came to my mind was the concept that, okay, why we ask people on a Friday night to come out and help with the Pizza with Santa event and that sort of thing. We give and we ask others to give because God loved us first and gave to us. And it's almost that natural progression in my mind of being thankful for the blessings we've received, and that's how we show thanks. I mean, is that kind of the idea there?
Right. Because of what God has blessed us with, it is from that place that we in turn give back. And so we're never asked to be the first to give. You see, God was willing to do that first and foremost. He was willing to make that first sacrifice. He was willing to make that first gift of sending His Son. And so because of that grace, that's the place in which we give from. If we don't give from that place, then we're getting the cart before the horse, in essence. And if you get that picture of having the cart and the horse behind the cart, the horse cannot push the cart. Right. It's not going to get anywhere. And so it's making sure that, we talked about the cart being the giving and that the horse being the power. Some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. God is the power by which we are able to do these things. And so by having this great blessing, we are able to to have the right focus and the right mentality. Giving has been the most misunderstood as far as the world, or maybe someone who just comes in and here's another church that wants me to give them money,
Right.
and we're going to misunderstand it if we see it as getting the cart before the horse. If others see, oh, it's all about the money, well, then they've got the wrong mentality. They've got the wrong idea about it. The giving is there, but it's as a result of the greatest gift. It's not the purpose. So, and that gets us to the concept of our purpose Sunday. It's like, what is our purpose and why we're doing it? And so the purpose is not the gift. The purpose is the fact that we have been given everything, and then the result we give.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Once you put everything, it's like you said, cart before the horse. Once you put everything in its proper order and let it all work together properly, it just makes sense how it all goes together. Absolutely. The other clip I want to play, to me, this was, how I am about social media, and I love the reference that you kind of made with social media during this session and how all this kind of ties to social media. Let me play this clip, and I want to get your thoughts on it.
How do you respond to them? Do you retaliate? Man, we do retaliate a lot on social media. More and more we are seeing it to where people don't respond in a loving way. We don't see this treating others the way you want to be treated. You treat others the way they treated you in one type and one click and one send. And you see just the dangers of what it's doing to the church. Can you tell someone that you're interacting with on social media that, hey, I'd love to have you come to worship with me on Sunday? Can you do that and then be okay with that? Or then be like, hey, that'd be great. Or you go to worship? Really? I wouldn't have known it.
You struck a chord with me on that clip, because I'm like, wow. I mean, if preach on. I mean, there is so much need for people to think before they click and before they send, and just like, sometimes I think we, and look, we're all human. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm perfect on this too, but sometimes we've in the past we tend to say things that we may later regret, and I think sometimes that happens on social media as well. And and how you tied it in with this concept of giving, cart before the horse here too. I think it all falls as part of that. Is that
right?
You've got to be careful what you're trying to do here. You can't put cart before the horse in the same way with how you treat people on social media.
Right. And you mentioned that we're all human. And I think that's so important. We see that human element on social media more than ever, because things are less, I guess, it's just people just put it out there, and possibly because of the screen, and people think hide behind the screen, nobody's going to see it. We have no clue what's being seen. So there is that human element of just not thinking before we click, like you said. But I think what's wonderful is, as a Christian, we have access to a superhuman element. We have access to God. And so the idea is we have access through what he has told us through his word. And so we know how we are to treat one another. We treat each other the way that we want to be treated, as I mentioned in Matthew 7 and verse 20, actually in verse 12, I said 21, but verse 12, he talks about that. So, what others, or what you wish others would do to you, do also to them, for this is all in the prophets. And that was based on the next verse is, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. And then, for the gate is narrow, the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. A lot of times people are not going to find it because those who are striving to be on it, maybe they're not seeing it.
Yeah.
Maybe, especially on social media, we're seeing that people are seeing less of the light being shone and more darkness being just sent. And so, well, let's see. What I was thinking about is this. We're told to give according to how we have been prospered, and that word for prospered means to be led on the good road. So that's where we got to this point. But making sure that as we're on our road to heaven, that we are striving to give the light to the world. So what I was saying is accessing God, we can access what he's told us, but we can also access him in prayer. When is the last time we've prayed over something that when we wrote it out? Like write out something in a response to someone, because say you see something that you're just going, I'm so concerned about this post, but I understand that the moment I write something and click it, that 1,000 people can respond to it, and
That's
I'm
right.
going to lose my opportunity. Should I do this publicly, or should I say, hey, I privately messaged you? But before I privately message, am I willing to pray, God, help me in this answer so that I can represent, is this answer what will be needed for people to respond? And so prayer is something that can help me to focus on what I'm doing. And so I'm not responding in that way. I'm not responding from anger. I'm not going to respond from, ooh,
Right.
I'm ready.
Right.
And so by taking my hands and stopping that typing and maybe praying first, it's
Absolutely.
that can do a whole lot of good and stop a lot of that damage.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. I mean, that's exactly, there are even times where I'll be sitting there and I'll be thinking as I'm commenting, and this has took me a long time to really get to this point. As I'm commenting a reply to someone that may be just as something, it may be silly. It may be something that 2 years ago I would have thought there's no way this could offend somebody, but now I'm starting to even second guess that. It's like, okay, is there possibly someone that's going to be offended by this response, even though it's silly and it's a, make me laugh, could it possibly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yet. Well, we can't apologize for living, but at the end of the day, we have a responsibility for how we come across. And let's see. I know there have been times like I saw something that said, Charlie Brown was considered racist. Well, I remember about in 1968, Franklin was the first African American peanut that was introduced in 1968, and it was right after Martin Luther King was killed. And so it was in a response to show that black and white can come together with our children, and it was the greatest impact, to show that to our society. And so I wanted to write Franklin, 1968. Well, by even commenting, I just felt like, well, it opened a door to, whatever. And so I decided not to press enter, because I didn't feel like that platform was the right place.
Right.
And just getting sucked into the response. I know that there are a lot of people who for years have not fallen into that picture that maybe is being painted with a broad brush of our past. Mm-hmm. And so, but I know that our past has had a lot of negatives within it. And so it depends on somebody's framework as to what their mentality is when they come to that. And so social media is never the place to fix things. No. Social media has not become the place to debate and to win.
Right.
It never will.
No, it never will. And I'm not sure. The way I look at that is, all right, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before social media, how were discussions like this handled? Well, they were handled either one-on-one or in a group setting. And even then, I don't think. Yes. And even then, face-to-face, you didn't win an argument. You just simply were just like, okay, this is how we feel about the situation, but it usually did not change your opinion about it. It might influence it some, but what I find is face to face, you're going to be a lot more cordial. Yes. But making sure that we're not just sitting there and instead of not listening, sitting there and formulating a response to an assumption. Right. Being willing to sit there and listen, give back to what is being said, so people know that you're hearing them. By doing that, you're going to be able to see somebody else's perspective and
if your perspective needs to change, then it will.
Right.
But if they see that you heard them and they recognize that, then they're going to hear what you have to say. But
Yes.
we miss that when we go digital.
Yes.
Because people aren't seeing my eyes
Yes.
when I'm responding. They aren't hearing my voice in concern, or they're just not hearing a soft response. So
Right.
I could write, I love you to someone, and that, I'm saying I love you, and then, but they might hear I love you in a way of like, somebody's just, well, they're just messing around.
Right.
They're being
Right.
sarcastic in their response. I can't control that. All I can control is pressing enter or not. And so, I love actually that we've been able to discuss this, because this is so important.
It is.
Because we see positives in social media, just like what you and I are doing right now.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And to that same end is when people hear our response or they don't hear a response on social media, they may also miss us when we follow up by saying we want you to come to church with us. Because if there's been a divide that's created through this social media conversation that maybe blew up over something it shouldn't have, they missed an opportunity to hear us invite them to come to church or to come visit us at our church. So it's a huge snowball effect and all, but I love for us being able to talk about this morning. I know it kind of maybe got a little bit off the sidetrack of giving, but to me, it's still such a part of it.
What are we giving the world? Are we
Great
letting
point.
our light so shine before men that they may see our good works, but give glory to our Father in heaven? Are the things that I'm doing every single day, and people are seeing what I do every single day more than they ever have before if I'm on social media.
Yeah.
And so we have to discuss this. And I think we have a lot of our older members who did not grow up with social media, where now they have a platform. And what I'm finding is, that what I've actually always loved about the willingness to just tell me like it is, because I'm never going to question what someone thinks if they're willing to just tell me like it is. I've always appreciated that one-on-one.
Yep.
But what I find is someone who just tells it like it is, there's millions of people who are doing that on social media. And so we're finding that mentality is very destructive on social media, because people don't care to respond. And in the exact opposite. And so that individual says, well, there's no respect in the world. And, this person's not respecting me. Well, they don't know you.
Right.
They don't have the years of understanding where you're coming from. And so they just see your comment. And so they respond. Well, then if you respond, that's the liberal left today, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Then you're hurting that person, and you're hurting yourself. You're hurting your influence for the Lord.
Yes.
Possibly for eternity with that individual.
Yes. Absolutely. I pray every day that I won't say something that will discourage someone from asking me about the church. And absolutely. Tremendous discussion. We could spend a lot more time on this, but I know we need to get to our question of the week. But before we get to our question of the week, tell us a little bit about what you're planning on preaching on tomorrow morning at the church building.
Well, we're really going to look more, because it's Purpose Sunday. We're going to look at what is the purpose of giving, but from the idea of it being a cheerful giver. And so we're going to let 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7 provide our points for the morning. First of all, give heartily, give willingly, and thirdly, give cheerfully. And so looking forward to our discussion with that, and recognizing that when we have done this, that giving cheerfully comes as a result of being given to. When you have experienced some things that only God could have done in taking care of you spiritually, physically, when you give in response, when you give as a result of that, that's when cheerful giving can take place.
Wow.
Cheerful giving cannot come from something that's an exaction. Cheerful giving, but y'all need to just give cheerfully. Y'all be cheerful. It just doesn't work.
When you said it like that, right? Yeah.
Podcast that your volume is turned down. I apologize for hurting your ears. Maybe it brought cheer. I don't know.
Maybe it did. Gave you a reason to laugh. That's fantastic. Right. That is great. Well, we want you cheerfully to be with us tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, 8 o'clock or 10:30 at Deerfoot Church of Christ. Our building's on Old Springville Road. Mailing address is Pinson there. If you're putting that in your GPS, just search Deerfoot Church of Christ. Or you can go to our website, deerfootcoc.com, and you can visit us there. All right, let's get to our question of the week. And this one, you said, was submitted to you, Richard.
Yes. Well, the full question is, if the Bible says do not kill and the Bible says obey the laws of the land, then what happens with service members when they kill by law? I think this is just a fantastic question, and it's a doozy, because it's also one that I have struggled with in my life. I know after 9/11, my best friend and I decided that we were going to go into service, and so we were either going to be firemen or we were going to be military. My best friend went into the military, Nathaniel Morrison. I'm very thankful for your service. And I decided to go into the fire department. And so that's when, but it was both of us sitting there discussing in response to 9/11. And so this is something I actually was planning on going in the military with him, and I was going to be a chaplain because of this question, because of this. Well, my boss was in the military, and he said, Richard, you wouldn't be able to do it. And I went, what do you mean? He said, you would not be a good chaplain. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, because you're too convicted with the word. Wow. He says you have to be a general you have to overgeneralize. He says you've got to be a preacher for every single person. And he says you're too convicted with the Bible. And I thought, whoa, Wow. And so that one was kind of, whoa, it was an eye opener. But there are ways to do that, and I decided to go a different route. But with my reason for it was I struggle with this concept. Mm-hmm. So, because does the Bible say do not kill? And that's from Exodus chapter 20 with the 10 Commandments. I like to turn there. And I believe, yes, it is verse 13. It says, you shall not murder, is what it says there. But some versions say kill. Okay. But the word here is for murder. And it also, this word also can cover causing human death through carelessness or negligence, is a note that I have in my Bible for this word. And a reason also we know that this is specifically referring to murder is the context. If you look at actually chapter 21 in verse 15, so it's the next chapter. He goes through and talks about laws in which how you are to live with your fellow man and how you are to treat your fellow man. Verse 15 says, whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. So under the law of God, if a child struck his mother or father, they would be brought before the council and they would be put to death. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. So this is under the law of God, under the old law. Right. Stole a human being and then sold that human being. Whoever was in possession of that human being would be put to death.
Wow.
You talk about what's going on with missing persons, and and this is still happening today with people stealing people.
Yeah, and human trafficking. People. Right.
Yeah, sex trafficking and just disturbing things in our world. Yep. And so this is how God handles this under the old law. Whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. Wow. I mean, this is, these are things that, God had this in mind, so that's why you're to honor your father and your mother. It's not a pick or choose under the old law. And so, this is something that's important. Because he says, you shall not murder, but then he says that they will be put to death. Well, who's going to be putting them to death? God's people.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole nother discussion, and maybe that will create more questions concerning this.
Yep.
But recognizing that that if people who disobeyed God's law would be put to death, we have to recognize that this is specifically referring to murder. But again, nobody had the right to just pick up a stone and throw it at someone. They were always brought before a council. They were always brought before a trial, a group of people who were to put them on trial based on God's law. So that's another thing, is if someone were to just take the law into their own hands and do that, that's murder. Right. So we have a lot of other things behind this as to why this is, there is a law that is established, and there is a system that was established under that law. And so that's important to recognize. Well, so when it comes to this is not referring to murder. It's referring to, this is referring to murder, not referring to killing. Mm-hmm. So, but is it still lawful to do this, to kill as a service member under the government, right? Well, let's look at, I like to look at Mark chapter 12 and verse 13. Jesus is being trapped by, they're test him. And, I find it interesting how Jesus responds. It says, you have some Pharisees, the Herodians, try to trap him in his talk. In there in verse 13, in Mark 12, it says, verse 14 says, they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God." I love this. They're trying to say, we know that you're balanced. Well, we know that you're true. We know that you're not given to opinion, but what is your opinion? In essence, what they're about to ask.
Yeah.
It says, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? If Jesus, he's been given a yes or no question, right? A question that he has to tell yes or no to. So if he says yes, it is lawful to render to Caesar, he can be brought before that council, and under the law of Moses, he could be killed because because these are Gentiles that were the Romans that were over them, and so then if he says no, it is not lawful.
Right.
And they're going to take him before Caesar and have the Romans kill him. Well, they do, about 2 years later.
Yeah. Eventually he does. Yeah.
Eventually he does. They're trying everything they can. And so they think that they have him trapped. Well, this is how Jesus responds. Verse 15 says, but knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. So they brought one, and he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? They said to him, Caesar's. So where did they get the coin? Probably in their own pocket. Mm-hmm. The coins that they had the Caesar's inscription on that coin, just like our quarter does today. Yeah. It has George Washington on the back of it. Mm-hmm. And so I have one of these coins, and it's possibly it could be the very one that was in his pocket. But it has the picture of the Caesar on it. And so they were using the money of the Caesars freely under the law of Moses. So that's why he says they're hypocrites. But also, they have one of those coins. They're not going to say, well, you can't spend it.
Right.
So they brought one and said to him, whose likeness and inscription is? They said, it's Caesar's. So Jesus said to them, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. Give to God what is God's, and give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Well, so the idea is Caesar is going to require certain things of his people. Our government is going to require things of his people. In the idea of the draft might be reinstated. Eventually, who knows? But we found a lot of people who were drafted into the military. A lot of people who were conscientious objectors. And so they struggled with this, just like I struggled with this when I was discussing possibly going into the military. how can I go about killing my fellow man when I'm striving to bring him to Christ? I'm told to love my enemies, to pray for those who persecute me.
Right.
Well, that is very specific. It's referring to, to someone who's in the kingdom of heaven. So those who are part of the kingdom, how can we kill? Well, we need to look at Romans chapter 13, and I think this is very important. Romans 13 talks about the governing authorities, and this is Paul referring to the Caesar Nero when he says this. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So this says that our governing authority, they carry a sword. Do they bear it in vain? Well, who carries the sword of the government? It's the military. Mm-hmm. And so that's important to recognize. Can a Christian, bear the sword of the government? Well, we're told that the Christian should be subject to the governing authorities. That will then very well cause a Christian to even bear the sword for the government if he's called to do so. I think at the end of the day, because our governing authority has gotten rid of the draft, we're not required to be in the military. So if you have an issue with this, you're not called to bear arms.
Right.
You don't have to do this. But if the draft should be reinstated, there are several within our history who have done wonderful things for the cause of Christ as a serviceman or a servicewoman. And so, I knew of, Alvin York, who was a conscientious objector in World War I, was the most decorated war hero. He's definitely the most decorated conscientious objector ever. Well, what he recognized was this very passage in Mark chapter 12, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and to God that which is God's. Actually, I met Alvin York's son, got to shake his hand because I just fell in love with his story as a child.
Wow.
And went to East Tennessee. I got to go to his house. The state of Tennessee gave him because of his efforts overseas in France.
Wow.
And so what he did, his whole purpose was he got rid of an entire machine gun nest single-handedly, and that meant he killed people. He killed Germans. He was trying to save lives because they were killing hundreds and thousands of his comrades. And so he did this to save lives rather than to kill. And so this man was a sharpshooter. He could shoot. Actually, what's interesting, he was able to shoot in 5 shots. He was able to shoot dead center every time. And it's just an incredible story of this young man that was able to do this at 19 years old. At the end of the day, we have to do what our conscience tells us within Scripture, and making sure that Scripture is building up our conscience. And so, realizing that you can also be a conscientious objector. I understand there was a conscientious objector who was. There's a movie that was written about him. That was made about him. It was the Hacksaw Ridge. I can't remember the man's name, but he saved over 50 people single-handedly. Right off of that ridge, he was able to lower them to safety as they'd all pulled out, but he didn't. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't shoot it once. And so he saved countless lives because of this. And so there are ways to go around this. And actually, because of him, laws were set. You can be a serviceman. Yeah. According to that. And so it is a
Desmond
challenge.
Doss. Desmond Doss, is that the?
Doss.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And one of our elders actually was in the VA hospital and met Desmond Doss.
Oh, wow.
Rick Glass.
How about that?
So I don't think he knew all of the things until the movie came out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tremendous. I love how you put all that together. And I do think that ultimately in the end, it does come down to, you do have to listen to your conscience as you read the scriptures and make that decision for yourselves. But that I think there is good biblical standards there that you can apply either way. And I like how you put that. That's, to me, the context. I think the context, and when you start to think about words the way they were, the original words in the Hebrew language or whatever language it was used to write in initially, how that word was interpreted in its time, because the interpretations can be changed. Words can have a meaning, like the word, I don't know, I'm going to go our Urban Dictionary here, but the word lit now in the year 2018 means a little different than maybe what it did even 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
So I think it's kind of the same theory. Literally. Right. Exactly. I see what you did there. So anyways, I fantastic. I love it. And you and I talked about, I know we're wrapping up here, but question of the week, we're our monthly question and answer session at Deerfoot is going to be a week earlier this month, next Sunday, not tomorrow night. Right.
Christmas Sunday. And we're going to be out of town. And so Tim didn't want to have to handle it by himself. And so, and he shouldn't have had to. And so it ended up, it's great that we're able to move it back. And I'm really,
absolutely,
really thankful we get
It'll
to
be
do that.
fantastic. It'll be great. So if people have a Bible question that they want you to answer either on the podcast here or at question and answer session coming up in a week, what's the best way for them to get those questions to you?
Well, my email will be a great one, richard@deerfootcoc.com. That'd be an opportunity to ask any question, because maybe this answer has produced more questions, and we would love to handle that. And actually, I might even handle this same question on the day, because I think it's important that we discuss it. I think we need to see the balance within this, but this doesn't give us license to there's a fine balance between murder and killing.
Yes.
And so we've got to make sure that we're doing this and being subject to our governing authorities, but also being subject to God, and finding that balance somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely.
Is a challenge.
I agree with that. Richard, it's been a great podcast today. This has been fantastic. Appreciate you, and I hope you enjoy this rainy birthday day for your kids, for your son later on today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful for this, because you've stopped me from having to run in this rain, so I can now justify why I didn't run this morning. So
yes, absolutely. Anything I can do. Absolutely. That is fantastic. Richard, thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
God bless.